the child. We are here to continue our dialogue with the Jamaican delegation on Jamaica's third and fourth combined report under the Convention on the Rights of the Child. And you got a lot of questions yesterday that we are now curious to hear your answer to. So I'll give the floor back to the Honourable Minister of Youth and Culture, Lisa Hammer. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, rapporteurs, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for yesterday and for the questions and for the hospitality from the committee. If I may, with your permission, Madam Chair, can I introduce the members of the delegation? I am Lisa Hanna, and I am the Member of Parliament for one of the largest rural constituencies in Jamaica, and I'm also the Minister of Youth and Culture. To my left is Ambassador Wayne McCook. To his left is my children's advisor in the Ministry of Youth and Culture, Mrs. Sadie Keating, the author of the Keating Report. I also have Mr. Newton Douglas, who is responsible for a number of things at the Child Development Agency. I have Ms. Ella Garty, who is a policy officer in the Ministry of National Security. And we have three persons here who are members of the mission in Geneva and the Jamaican mission. We have Mr. Peart, we have Tanisha, and we have Patrice Laird Grant. So we are actually a very diverse delegation. What I will do is I will take the questions and answers in random order according to how they were asked. I think in total there were about 47 questions, follow-up questions from last night. And, our friend Mark Connolly, who is our country representative from UNICEF. Regarding the National Plan on Early Childhood Development / Stimulation, has a new phase been developed for post-2014. A new strategic plan has been developed for the period 2014 to 2018 in Jamaica. What is the scope of coverage of the early stimulation program, especially in rural areas? And how many families do we have registered, and in what regions of the country are they registered? We have 1,539 persons registered, and many have been served over the past 3 years. Of that number, 922 are from urban areas and 610 are from rural. 70% of the children on the program are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And they're also what is called PATH beneficiaries, which is one of our social protection programs. Some of them receive support from the Special Rehabilitation Grant from the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, while others are minimum wage earners. The non-governmental organizational sector also provides services to young children with disabilities, and in 2013, the community-based rehabilitation Jamaica program served about 396 persons with disabilities ages 0 to 18 years in 4 different parishes. And when we speak about parishes, mainly Kingston and St. Andrew is an urban area, and the other 13 could be classified as rural, urban / urban rural in some of them. So in those other parishes, there was St. Catherine, Manchester, St. Elizabeth, and St. James, that those other persons were serviced. Regarding special rehabilitation grants for children with disabilities, how much is the grant and how many families actually receive it? Families of children with disabilities are currently able to access a grant ranging from 20,000 Jamaican dollars to 100,000 Jamaican dollars, depending on the type of business that the family is able to manage. And the grants typically go towards like a income generating activity, the raising of chickens, selling of confectionery, cash crops, etc. Well, if you put that in US dollars, it's about 115 Jamaican to $1 US. What is the status of the Disabilities Act? Does it address the rights of the disabled in all spheres of society and their integration in schools? The Disabilities Act was actually enacted last year, in October 2014, and it promotes and protects the full sphere of persons with disabilities for privileges, interests, benefits to children. And what we've done is embarked on a survey to assess how many persons there are in Jamaica with disabilities. This is something that we're now pioneering. The results are going to be used to develop a comprehensive strategic plan on how the country responds to the issue. And the legislation makes provision for children with disabilities to be integrated into the educational school system. The issue with children with special needs, they have to have programs which attend to special offerings and continuous evaluation and assessment, which we're currently doing. And so when you had also asked about the advocacy, is there a society in general regarding children with disabilities, and what is the status of the draft curriculum for children with disabilities, and what is the content of the curriculum, and if there's any training in teachers in this regard, what is important to note is that it was really the NGO community that at the time had developed that curriculum and had certain forms of advocacy. The government currently has responded positively with the Disabilities Act and provides grants to those organizations as well in terms of the offerings and programs and services to children with special needs. The private sector in Jamaica has also provided buildings and materials and equipment. And additionally, the Ministry of Education now has a sensitization program under what is called the Ministry of Education System Transformation Program, the ESTP, where private sector and NGOs in the form of public fora get together and conduct parenting educational seminars to show what kinds of materials and equipment are needed. The other thing is that with this teacher advocacy, this has resulted in the establishment of an additional special education pull-out unit using data from the Child Find activity undertaken by the Ministry of Education through that special program. So we're now, through the survey with the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, with the Disabilities Act, with the Ministry of Education and the private sector, the NGOs, there's really now a comprehensive thrust to making sure that we really address this issue. The draft curriculum for children with disabilities has been completed, and a training session for teachers who are involved in the piloting of the draft curriculum took place on January 14 of this year. The content areas include language and communication, life skills, functional mathematics, science, and physical education. The delivery of the curriculum is being driven by arts and technology, and after the pilot, there will be a wide-scale training which is necessary to achieve the full rollout of the program. There is an agency of government with direct responsibility for persons with disabilities, including children. And the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities is an agency under the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. This particular council works very, very closely with the NGO sector and advocacy groups to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. They also offer services including job placements and provide rehabilitation grants and assistance and certain other devices. The other question that you had is that more than 4,000 children with disabilities are in special schools. What about mainstreaming these schools to make them disability friendly? The particular act of which I speak, and what we've done is we have made the act in soft copy for the committee so that you're able to see it. And I know the Secretariat, we will give it to you online. That particular act has enshrined that all schools become disability friendly. To this end, the primary curriculum, which is being revised, known as the Standards-Based Curriculum for Primary Schools, has features to allow for modifications and adaptations to facilitate learners with mild disabilities. The training of teachers in mainstream schools is being undertaken by the Ministry of Education to ensure effective teaching and learning, and the proficiency pathway approach for primary schools has been developed and is being implemented at that level to ensure that children with disabilities and other children with special needs, as used in Jamaica and the international special needs community, can attend schools with their peers with appropriate program offerings and continued evaluation and assessment. At the secondary school level, an approach to include secondary education is being developed to realize our mantra in Jamaica, which is every child can learn and every child must learn. This approach provides students with the opportunity to access one of 3 educational pathways throughout their secondary education. Students who are operating at the normative level will access the national standard curriculum. Those who need additional time will be provided with a secondary pathway curriculum and can cross over to the normative pathway based on their performance and their psych educational assessment based on performance at the end of the primary and the supporting assessment. Some students will be placed in a 5-year secondary pathway program, which will provide much skills for functioning at a particular level and career interest. I should also say that coming out of what is called the National Youth Service in Jamaica, which is a youth service which trains young people in voluntary services and placement in internships, that particular entity has now reserved 10% of its spaces for persons with disabilities to be placed in internships, in training. And so across the board, where that particular entity impacts about 12,000 young people a year, 10% of those spaces are reserved for people with disabilities between the ages of 17 to 25. The Ministry of Labour and Social Security, through its early stimulation program, has also mainstreamed approximately 250 children with development disabilities over a 3-year period from 2012 to 2014 into mainstream schools, and children are also being mainstreamed from other institutions. For example, the School of Hope and the Microcare Center. Based on the passage of that particular Disabilities Act, it is envisioned that a number of schools will be retrofitted over time. Of course, this is going to take significant resources. And so what is happening now is that as we're doing the estimates of expenditure, the Ministry of Education is factoring into their budget how to actually make this a reality over a period of time. I wouldn't be able to tell the committee how fast that is going to be done, but I can tell you that it is a serious objective being undertaken by the Jamaican government. What is the legal status of the National Plan for Disabilities? A working group was established currently by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security in 2014 with the responsibility for determining the timetable for the establishment for a disability tribunal. Also, the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities has recently conducted 4 regional public consultations to gather information from the relevant stakeholders and the general public in designing the codes of practice and regulations for the Act and other relevant matters. So it has been passed in Parliament. So what is happening now is that all the attendant aspects are being dealt with so that it just doesn't sit on paper, but it actually can be implemented appropriately. The other issue that was actually raised.
Excuse me, have you finished disabilities? Because then I would like to ask a question. Or is it another issue under disabilities?
No, I think those were the questions relating to disabilities from the rapporteur from Bahrain.
So I just wanted to finish the disabilities before I started asking questions. That's why I asked you,
yes.
But I could ask now. When you say that, or we know that there are 4,000 children in special schools at the moment, what is your goal or your target when it comes to how many children should be integrated into or included into ordinary education out of those 4,000? You say you would integrate those with mild disabilities. And then I wonder how many of those 4,000 are these measures directed at?
Madam Chair, the one of the reasons why the survey is being done by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security is to address those issues. I think over the years, before this act was passed, there was not a collaborative approach in a very streamlined way at the policy level to have a kind of collation of data with persons with disabilities, especially in the rural areas. And what also has to happen is we recognize that there needs to be other intervention measures in other aspects of the rural areas, because currently a lot of the children have to come to the urban areas. We do have institutions in St. Catherine, in Portland, St. James and St. Mary, but we want to roll it out into other areas. So I believe that after that assessment is done, after the regulations are done, we will have a better idea at how many. The idea is to really have all of them placed. But at the moment, I would prefer to give you those figures at a later date, when they feel that they have completed an objective assessment of it.
Yeah, thank you. So then you say that the goal is to have all of these 4,000 children into ordinary schools with assistance and so on. Ah, I see. Because you said just mild disabilities, so I wondered if there's is that just for the time being that you will have the facilities for only those with mild disabilities?
Well, for the time being, that is... It is. There is... We have a lot of teacher training to do in Jamaica for persons living with disabilities, particularly those with severe autism, for instance, and the resources will now have to be put in place. I can speak as a rural member of parliament who has constituents, for instance, with children who have extreme disabilities, and many of those mothers have to actually take their children to urban areas to have them assessed, etc. The goal of the Ministry of Education is to be able to have them access points in the various parishes, because if you've been to Jamaica, you will understand it's very mountainous. The geographical areas are wide. Many are small farmers up in the hills of the country parts or the rural areas, and sometimes transportation is very, very difficult. And the parishes are very, very big. I think if you think of Jamaica, sometimes persons who haven't been tend to think of it as a small, flat island. It's not. It's very, very dense. It's very, very hilly. It's very mountainous. And what we have to try and find are solutions, particularly for those persons, which is what we're doing at the moment. And even in our primary care health facilities, to be able to have those child guidance clinics at ports of entry in the rural areas so that children can also be assessed. So the Disabilities Act, which was passed last year, is really transformative for our country. It was a long time coming, but we managed to get it passed, and it really will be transformative for the country.
Thank you. Yeah, because the 4,000 children who are at the moment in special schools, they go to boarding schools, many of them, don't they?
Many of them do, but also many of them have caregivers who come to the various areas and stay with them. So that is a situation, because there's also an extended family in Jamaica. We have a society that has a village that raises a child in most instances, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, the aunts, the uncles, who take time to be with children. So a lot of times, I went to the graduation, for instance, of one of the programs for the early stimulation program, and there was one grandfather, for instance, who left his job just to make sure that his 6-year-old grandson could be taken to school every morning. He came in from the rural area, stayed in Kingston, worked with him, stayed with him, and the little boy at 6 who had mild autism was the valedictorian for the graduation ceremony. And if you could see a grandfather who had tears in his eyes, because he for the first time he saw his grandchild really do something that the doctors perhaps said was not going to be possible. And he had, when I spoke to him, he just said, there was nothing that would have prevented him. Once the child got into the program, there would have been nothing that prevented him from being able to take that child to make sure that he was a part of it. And we really want to be able to roll that out to many different children across the country. Are you finished asking? Okay. Regarding teenage pregnancies, what is the level of medical and other services relating to STIs in rural areas? Jamaica has a formidable primary care health system, and we have clinics across the country, and many of them get assistance through those clinics once they are pregnant. The adolescents are treated for all related services in a respectful and non-judgmental manner at health facilities. However, for minors who are below 16 years old who present with an STI or a pregnancy, the matter must be reported to the Office of the Children's Registry, and the parent has to be brought in. And certainly, in some cases, that has to, because of the age of consent, we treat with it as a very serious matter. Sometimes the child doesn't want to say who the perpetrator is or who the father of the child is, for fear of the father being charged in some way. So sometimes the name of the father is not put on the birth certificate of the child. According to a study, 21% of females and 23% of males aged 13 to 15 admitted to attempting suicide. Are there enough trained specialists to identify those at risk? Our records show that the mental health unit of our Ministry of Health, in collaboration with the NCDA, did a study on suicidal behavior as a part of our school survey, which was done in September to December of 2013. This study was funded by UNICEF. A total of 3,471 children were surveyed, and a total of 1,191 completed a specific instrument about suicidal behavior and a questionnaire that was revised. The results indicated that 19.8% of the total group were at risk for suicidal behavior. The findings suggest that Jamaica's overall rate of completed suicide is low, but the level of risk for suicidal behavior is for some concern, certainly for us as policymakers. The findings also suggest that the Ministry of Health, in response to the study that was done, formed a task force to explore the recommendations made, and arising from this effort, a series of training and teaching tools and training aids in suicide prevention for 3 categories were developed. These categories were the first line, health workers. The second line was youth in development, developing resilience to these at-risk factors. And the third were training for teachers and guidance counselors at schools to identify suicidal risks and behavior. I can also say that in the Department of Correctional Services, over 400 persons were trained to identify what suicidal behavior looked like. The protocol for the improved management of attempted suicide in emergency rooms was also developed, and the Ministry of Health's team is now preparing to carry out the training of personnel within hospitals and clinics. Dr. Wendell Abel, the head of community health and psychiatry in the department at the University of the West Indies, admits that suicide in adolescents in Jamaica is still low, and it's not increasing. It's not on the increase. It's not on the uptide. And he said that the recommendations for the training and the teachers and the guidance counselors should be implemented, which is what we're doing. Children with mental health disorders are seen at the child guidance clinics island-wide, which are a part of the mental health services of the Ministry of Health. And the staffing of these clinics is composed mainly of professionals such as psychiatrists and other medical officers and mental health nurses and trained practitioners. At least 22 of these types of professionals are made available to support the work of the child guidance clinics. And I know in particular that the Ministry of Health is also trying to fund another major project to make sure that children who are seen at these clinics are seen on a timely basis. There is an increasing prevalence of STIs among girls infected by older men. What related programs are there for children in schools, as well as for reproductive health counseling, and what financial assistance is there to poor families to remove the risk of children falling into prostitution? We have a National Family Planning Board under the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Education has approved curricula on sexual reproductive health that is taught in our schools in Jamaica. We have a robust STI and HIV, AIDS, antiretroviral drugs program at our clinics and at our health institutions, and there are other social intervention programs in terms of contraception, in terms of community-based programs, teaching, in terms of programs and fairs at our secondary schools and teaching about STIs, about HIV, about AIDS. My ministry, the Ministry of Youth and Culture, also does that as a part of our program. So there is curricula. In terms of encouraging girls to not go into prostitution, that is something that is ongoing. Those are public service campaigns that are there. And they actually get pamphlets and other kinds of tools at the clinics in terms of takeaway material that they can use to get information on how AIDS is transmitted, how STIs are transmitted, how STDs are transmitted. So there is a robust program in Jamaica about that. Is education free in all spheres, bearing in mind fees in secondary schools? Placements are free up to secondary school. External examinations, fees are not free, but there's a subsidy for 3 subjects for students who can't afford to pay for their external examinations. And what I think the rapporteur was referring to was what is called sometimes auxiliary fees, and different secondary schools across the island have different rates, but the schools are heavily subsidized by the government, and no child is turned away from a school because they can't afford it. The Ministry of Education actually steps in and makes sure that provisions are made for those children. And if you will recall, there are about in excess of 270,000 children who are socially protected by the Ministry of Labour and Social Security under a PATH program. And this also helps to keep our children in school and helps to pay for some of the exam fees. Are there enough secondary schools to meet the demand? In my opening statement, I spoke about the increases in the construction of new schools, as well as the renovating and retrofitting of existing schools to increase classrooms, and that program is ongoing. There are not, at the moment, enough secondary places to increase demand, and so we have what is called the shift system, which is the extended school hours to accommodate different times for cohorts going to school. And this has been working, but one of the reasons why we're building new schools and extending the spaces is because we want to get rid of the shift system. I'm not sure if I addressed the shift system problem in the question that you had asked, because there was an attendant question that you had asked with regards to the shift system. The problems that we find with the shift system and why we want to get rid of it over time is because of how late some children stay after school and trying to get them home on time. And so we are making headway in the removal of this system. Do you have enough teachers, and will you build enough schools or build more schools? The short answer to both of those is yes. We actually have more teachers than can be absorbed into the system. What we actually need are qualified teachers in specialized areas such as mathematics and in some of the sciences. And a lot of emphasis is now placed on in-service training for teachers to develop some of the required skills and competencies. We will build schools subject to the fiscal space in this year's budget, and we will continue to expand schools in various areas. And I can speak openly and frankly that in the last 3 months, the Minister of Education has opened in excess of 5 new additions to existing schools, secondary schools in Jamaica, in terms of new blocks of classrooms in schools. And those have been physically put on the ground already. Regarding the reintegration of school-age mothers in schools and the 100% targets, how will you achieve this? We'll achieve this by placing the mothers in schools after the mother has given birth. The Ministry of Education actually remains committed to ensuring that all students who exit the system as a result of pregnancy will be afforded a place in school, either the same school or another school. This will be done by ensuring that all cases of pregnancy are reported and a tracking system established to make contact with the students, whether through the centers, the health clinics, which most of them attend directly, or offer them a placement to continue their education. Regarding children in street situations...
Excuse me, I would like to ask a question about that. I wonder what are the reasons why the girls don't continue to go to school when they get pregnant? I mean, of course, when they give birth, that's one thing, but do they also end their schooling or stop their schooling during the pregnancy?
We have a center called the Women's Center, which many go to. And they don't stop going to school while they're pregnant. The Ministry of Education right now does not have a policy for them to go to school while they're pregnant in the formal school system. What the policy speaks to is that after birth, we reintegrate them into the school system again, but they have the choice of continuing their education while they're pregnant at the Women's Center.
Does that mean they cannot continue their schooling at the ordinary school while they are pregnant for some kind of moral reason or something?
I'm not sure if moral is a correct word to use. We just have a policy that it's currently not done. It's done after the mother has given birth. That is something that that was a decision that was taken, but the issue is to have them go back after.
But what happens then if a pregnant girl would like to continue her schooling in the ordinary school? Would she be, expelled may be a too strong word, but would she be told that she would not be welcome?
I think not welcome is not the right term. I think certainly the policy right now is looking at how to get them back into school after they're pregnant. But no, the issue is not to have them in the school system while they are pregnant. The policy is being looked at to see how the child can actually go back to the same school after they have given birth.
So this has to do something to do with attitudes to pregnant girls? And would they rather not be seen in the public while they're pregnant?
No, we don't have an attitude towards pregnant girls not being seen in public and being locked away. That is not it at all. The Ministry of Education and the government of Jamaica has a policy in that area.
Thank you. Olga.
Good morning. In this regard, I'm wondering whether in practice these girls are able to, after they gave birth to a child, come back to the same level of education, or they lose a year?
No, they will be able to come back to the same level of education. Any other follow-up questions, Chair? Or that is it?
I think that is it at this point, yeah.
Regarding children in street situations, reported to be 6,500 per year, a 2002 survey, do we have any updates on these statistics? The statistics that you refer to are dated, and since then we have moved certainly because there was a tie with this to to child labor, and we have since moved the age of light work from 13 to 15, and to 15 years and over. Even then, the work must not be hazardous within their education or harmful to their health or infringes on their provisional rights. The government, in collaboration with the International Labour Organization, has initiated a program designed to improve service delivery towards minimizing exposure levels. The initiative is now moving into the second phase, which will involve an in-depth survey being conducted to better understand the issues. The survey will also seek to look at the broader issues of child labour, including children on the streets. The survey is scheduled to commence in March of this year, and the results will guide the formulation of a strategy to address the matters in a very cross-cutting way. Between April and June of 2014, the occupational safety and health inspectors have not identified any incidences or any incidents of child labour in over 3,000 inspections conducted. And as such, the government has not carried out any prosecutions in this regard. The team has also begun to sensitize employers and employees on this matter. What measures and programs are there to support and remove children from the streets and reintegrate them into the school system, especially those with HIV/AIDS? The police, in collaboration with the Child Development Agency, are the main source for identifying children on the streets and to take action where necessary. The team is required to investigate the circumstances by which children are on the streets, engage families to facilitate their mainstreaming, counseling, support, and other interventions offered by our child protection system, and those interventions are actually applied. What we have is something called the Possibility Program, which was established in 2001. And it came out of, at that time, the National Poverty Reduction Program, and it was spearheaded through the Office of the Prime Minister at that time. And it was a multi-agency project aimed at reducing the number of children that were on the streets, particularly young males that were on the streets who wanted to improve their life outcomes. The operations have observed that most of the windscreen wiping have now been decreased and have now been taken over by older youth who are males, and therefore they did not qualify for the Possibility Program, which were essentially children to 18. In other words, one of the objectives set out by the Possibility Program was actually met. Between 2001 to 2014, this program has served 693 boys at one center, of which 28 were served in 2014. The program has provided intervention on its skills employment and training for 750 children and young people over the same period between 2001 to 2014. Notwithstanding, there is certainly, because the Possibility Program is under my ministry, I feel that we can have more structured approaches to dealing with it, and we are actually putting that in place. And the CDA has ramped up its efforts as well, because what we recognize is that even though we have the intervention programs, somehow, and they're working, every once in a while, the CDA is called back in for the same child who might be found lurking back on the streets. So it has to be a consistent program that is ongoing, which we realize, and that was one of the reasons as well why we had the parenting intervention, because we find that if the parents are not on top of it, the children will resort to their usual behavior. So we have to spend more time with the parents, which we have been doing. And also, if necessary, give the parents a stipend if we find that perhaps they are in need of particular issues. In other times, we actually take the children in for care and protection, and until the parent can get back on their feet, the parent can come to the children's home, visit with the child, work with the child, until we can reintegrate the child back. And some of those children, Chair, there's a follow-up question over here.
Ms. Aldoseri.
Thank you very much. You were talking about 600 something that you took them to centers for
Yes.
training.
Yes.
They were children in street situation, or
They-
were they infected?
Some of them
with
were a
HIV?
little older, but some of them were children, and they were able to stay in the facility. It was like a hostel under the Possibility Program. But we also have the children's homes that takes those children in, and then we work with the families, and the families are able to come and visit with them and work with them, and we work with the parents as well for the reintegration.
Okay. Thank you.
There's a question from Mr. Gusto.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good morning. I'd like to thank the head of the delegation for all of your comments. I do have 2 or 3 follow-up questions. You said that when you find... Hello? Yeah. Thank you very much for all of the information that you've provided us with concerning street children. But I have 2 or 3 follow-up questions. You said that when you find a child in the street, the police puts them back in touch with their family. But if the child leaves their family again, runs away because of violence, for instance, and can't live in the family, you said that sometimes you force them to go back to school, but once again, if they run away from school again, what can you do? And with regard to orphans, can you resolve these issues? Do you try and put them in touch with their wider family, their cousins, or do you put them in a centre with other children in the same situation? Thank you.
Development Agency, if works with the police, if the police finds a child. And so it's not the police exclusively that does it. The children also attend school, and if in a situation where the child runs away from the parent for violence, for any reason, the child is taken into care and protection in our children's homes. The child is not allowed to go back. Well, not the better position is to have that child within the home for the state to put the intervention programs with the child. So at no time, if we feel the child is in harm's way, do we allow the child to go back into a situation like that. In terms of orphans, yes, we have 51 places of safety and children's homes where persons who are orphans are taken in. And if we actually have other family members and the family members want to have the children, we work with those other family members as well, because we feel that children really should be kept with families at all times.
Thank you. Then there's a question from Mr. Muddy.
Thank you very much, Minister, for the clarification given with regard to the child labor. Yet I think there are still one issue before we can close this particular issue. I mean, you have referred to 3,000 inspections, labor inspections took place, and no child was found working. Thus, there was no need for any persecution of any employer. Fine. No child has been found working. Is that child under 13 or under 15? In that sense, because you have raised the age to 15. Yet, what about the 699 working children you have referred to yesterday? What is their status? What you have done with them in this respect, and what you have done with their employers as possibly violating the child labor law in that sense. Just clarification on this issue in order to, I would say, wrap up the situation on child labor. Thank you.
We have an agency in Jamaica called the Office of the Children's Registry, which was established in 2007. The specific terms of reference of that agency is to collect reports anonymously of abuse, whether it's abuse with neglect, if someone is perceived as trafficking a child, if there's sexual abuse, And it is persons who call in anonymously to report these cases. That is a central registration. They can also call in to the Center for the Investigation of Sexual Abuses under what is called SISOCA with the police. But the agency that I refer to, the Office of the Children's Registry, is that agency that received, since 2007 to 2013, those 699 reports, anonymous reports of child labor. What happens when the OCR receives a report? It is then distributed to the various agencies with responsibility for investigating the reports. So, for example, if we receive a report on sexual abuse of a child and where the area is and the address, etc., that is fed to the Office of the Children's Advocate, it's fed to the CDA, which is a child development agency, and it's also fed to the police for the investigation to start. When we get the reports about child labor, that is now fed to the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. So when we talk about the inspections, those reports would have fallen under those inspections that the Ministry of Labour and Social Security would have done. So that is a central repository. The Office of the Children's Registry is a central repository, essentially, for reports. And those reports are anonymous, and we are obliged by law to act on when we get reports of children who are in this particular situation. Sure. Okay. Regarding the National Task Force on Trafficking, there is still a problem of rural to urban trafficking for forced labor prostitution. And 1 of 7 reported trafficking cases have been prosecuted. What has happened to the other ones? There have currently been 35 investigations under the Trafficking in Persons Act. There have been 5 arrests coming from those 35 investigations since January of 2014. The training of 76 law enforcement personnel have also been carried out to respond to the issues. There is a housing facility in place for persons removed from the experience, and there is also another pool of accommodation for persons who have been in trafficking or have been taken out of the trafficking experience. This particular secretariat that runs all of this is the Permanent Secretary for the Ministry of Justice. And it is given the highest priority. So far, since we've implemented the policy, 23 persons have been rescued from trafficking. 1 person has been prosecuted but pled guilty to the lesser charge, and so there was no conviction. The other issue, as it relates to pornography, 2 arrests have been made, but we haven't had any convictions yet. What of the help of trafficking victims? There are an array of services provided to trafficking victims, including protecting their identity and keeping them in safe spaces. They get health, dental, medical checks. There are also psychosocial interventions and counseling support. There's also social work interventions for both child victims and families towards coping with the situation and also facilitating the reintegration of these children and providing educational support for them while they're being kept safe if there is an ongoing investigation that's taking place. What are the timelines for submitting reports on the optional protocols of the CRC? Jamaica's report on the optional protocol on the involvement of children in armed conflict is complete and is now being verified prior to its submission to the committee through our mission office. We anticipate that this activity will be completed by March of this year. Work on preparing Jamaica's response on the optional protocol on the sale of children, children in pornography, and child prostitution was ratified in 2011, and Jamaica will commence the preparation of a report on this optional protocol as of April of 2015. What support is given to low-income and single-parent families? And what
Excuse me, I would just like to come back to trafficking for a moment. I wonder, you said that, or you didn't say, but you quoted our rapporteur as saying that you have a problem with rural and urban trafficking. And I wonder, do you feel that you catch what is going on, or that you are able to deal with this problem, or is there a lot of trafficking going on that you don't really have the overview of, and where you're not able to do anything because you don't know about it, so to speak?
Well, the Ministry of Justice is actually working very, very closely now to make sure that it doesn't happen. There is a number of data collection mechanisms that's taking place to track children who move from urban to rural and rural to urban. So to say that we don't know is not true. We do know. There is nothing to suggest that there is a lot of children that's being trafficked from rural to urban or vice versa. Once we get those additional statistics, we will be able to pass them on to you if you'd like.
Yes, because we talked a bit yesterday, or quite a lot, about missing children, and do you suspect that, or is there a link between the missing children and the trafficking of children, you think, or you know?
Well, one of the things I also said about missing children is that we are now looking at those surveys as well. We've tracked some of them and the reasons for their disappearance and the reasons for them running away. And it largely, to be honest with you, are domestic issues relating to parenting styles and other adolescent rebellious behavior.
Yes, I was more thinking after they'd run away because of those, or for those reasons, they might be picked up by a trafficker somehow.
Well, I think I answered that before in terms of, no, we have not been seeing a lot of what you would quote-unquote call the true definition of trafficking for the missing children, for instance. If when we pick up those that are still missing and we are able to assert what that is, then we'd be able to tell you. But for the most part, when we interview the children and the families, it's not a trafficking situation.
No, I was just interested to hear your view
Right.
on that. What about the 33 persons who were rescued from trafficking? Are you talking about children then, or are these including adults and everybody?
Young adults and children, because youth is defined between 16 to about 25, and it crosses over. So some of them would have been young adults.
Thank you. Then Mr. Gasto first.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the issue of trafficking, is there really transnational trafficking? Of course, Jamaica is an island, but is there really international trafficking of children that could be possible? And do you have cooperation agreements with neighbouring countries to enable you to face up to this problem jointly?
Or this particular program very, very seriously. We haven't seen a lot of transnational trafficking of Jamaican children the way that some other countries experience it. And we do have international agreements and cooperation so that if something is picked up, it is communicated. Or if another country, if we have children, for instance, who one particular incident was a situation where a fishing boat got lost about 2 years ago, and it wasn't deemed as trafficking. It was just that the fishing boat got lost and there were some children on board when we did the investigations, and we kept those children very safe. But on the whole, we haven't seen the export of Jamaican children, for instance. We haven't seen the influx of trafficking of children to Jamaica. And even in our reports to our international bodies that routinely do reviews on us and ask us to check on certain things, the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of National Security has fulfilled all its mandates in terms of making sure that all the checks and balances are in place for responding to those reviews.
Thank you. Then to Ms. Aldozeri.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions on child labour. Has the National Plan of Action on Child Labour been adopted and implemented, or is it still in a draft form and being reviewed? The second question, you also told us about the minimum age for work is 15. Yeah. What about those 13 to 15? They are still allowed to work, but light work. Can you define what light work is?
Light work is considered helping in a store, for instance, behind a counter. It's helping in terms of perhaps packing groceries. That's considered light work once it's not hazardous to the child, or if it is in an office setting, for instance, like an internship. So that is what is considered, and it's like a Christmas job or a summer job type of situation. And then you have the older ones who are along the same lines, and then you have certainly through like the National Youth Service, which is 17 to about 25, where they can be trained in areas of construction, they can be trained in administration, they can be trained in farming, and depending on the internships, they can also be placed in certain areas like that to get the work experience, if that is something that they want to attend to. As it relates to I'm trying to give you the exact data. So if I could actually come back to you on the child labor and the national plan, if that is okay.
Yeah. What about the Occupational Safety Health Act? Has it been enacted?
Yes. It's still in its draft form, and it's ready to go to cabinet. So we are really pushing forward. What we have are some policies that are ready, like the CCPA, like the one you refer to, like the review of the Child Adoption Act, and there are a number of them that are now ready to go forward to cabinet. What support is given to low-income and single-parent families? What is the availability of daycare and other facilities in Jamaica? Jamaica has put support in place at different levels for families, both in terms of social protection programs, the PATH program, the disability grants, etc. There are no state-operated daycare facilities in Jamaica. Adoption. Despite the head of the delegation's message, the process is still reportedly quite cumbersome. A 1990 request is still pending in 2014, and there are also 311 unresolved cases in 2014. We have actually streamlined adoption in such a way that we have cleared the backlog of 500 cases from the 1990s to last year. There are currently 40 cases that are pending, and those 40 cases have to do with the persons who want to adopt, providing extra information. The adoption board is now going to be writing those families, and they have started to give them 3 months to answer to those questions. The 1990 case, I don't know which case that is because we don't have a case that has been around since 1990. There was a 1999 case, and that was cleared. So if you want to adopt a child in Jamaica, it takes between 6 months to a year currently. And once the parent signs away their parental rights, because one of the things that we don't believe in is that you must take a child from a parent that parent has to sign away their parental rights of that child before the state can offer the child for adoption. What is the status of the review of the Adoption Act? The review, which was guided by a multi-sectoral group comprising of government and non-government actors, is now complete. We're now in the process of preparing the document, which outlines recommendations for amendment to the law for submission to our cabinet for its consideration, after which our Chief Parliamentary Counsel will draft the new legislation for action. Little resources are given for foster care in Jamaica, and it is insufficient and slow, and the payments are late. There are no visits from social services. Please respond. We have about 851 children in foster care. It's a program that works. We have a lot of children doing well in foster care. Recently, a number of the 45 students who qualified for tertiary, because we moved that figure from 4 to 45 since 2011 to now, are with families, and we find that children do well with families. We don't only give them stipends a month, but we give them grants for back to school every year, and those payments are made electronically. It's not true that social workers don't visit our foster care families. They visit once every 6 months or on a needs basis, and they can come in. As minister, we spend close to $1.7 billion on our children's homes, places of safety with staff, and the foster care program is within that. Admittedly, we could do with some increases in the subvention to our foster care families because the program is working. And I now have a task force in place headed by Mrs. Keating, who is now looking at, and that committee is looking at how to provide economies of scale, not only across the children's homes and places of safety, but how we can now look at how to give our foster families better support.
Ms. Sharif.
Thank you. A very good morning.
Good morning.
We're just wondering how much financial assistance is given to each foster family per child?
You're looking at about 4,000 a month, 4,000 Jamaican a month, and what we spend in our children's homes and places of safety are anywhere between 6,000 to 14,000 on each child in that system per week.
Is there a venue for foster parents to sort of like appeal on the amounts given if it's not sufficient?
They have been appealing. They appeal directly to me, and there are avenues. And if there are situations, because we have very good foster parents who have more than one child, and the CDA is not a carte blanche, inflexible, rigid monster. We actually listen. We actually work with the families. The young man, for instance, who has been admitted to medicine, who got 14 distinctions at his external examinations, we actually provided scholarships for that young man to go to university, and we find several scholarships with the families, and we work with the families, especially if the children are doing well, to assist them also in addition to the stipend for them going to school. The Prime Minister's Foundation, for instance, assisted the young man with a scholarship for him to go to med school. So it's not correct to say that the 4,000 is the only thing that we do. We do provide value-added and other forms of assistance to the foster care families. But on the whole, the main question that you're asking is if we can increase the subvention. Jamaica right now is going through a very strict financial structural adjustment program. We've passed all our tests and we've fixed the macroeconomic indicators. The government is very clear that we have not cut the social protection programs, especially to our children. In some instances, we've increased them. And so with this committee, looking at all of the indicators and the variables, it's how best to streamline it. We've had to fix a lot of issues, and I think you've recognized this over the past 2 years in Jamaica in terms of children, children's homes, places of safety, children in lockups, children in adult correctional facilities, and that required resources. So we're getting there.
That's nice to know. Just a follow up. Do foster families know of these other resources or avenues that they can tap on?
Absolutely, and we now even do functions, especially for the children who are doing well in state care and who are fostered once a year, to bring them in, talk to them. We also have a really big luncheon for those children who have done well and provide them with incentives and scholarships for those who have done well in their exams and at school. So we've really ramped up the program to demonstrate how thankful we are and appreciative we are for them doing this work.
What about those who have not done so well?
What do you mean?
The children.
For those children who have done well, you have these functions and luncheons and appreciations. But what about those children who have not done well? Do you have any motivational?
Yes, absolutely. And the as I said to you, the CDA is a living, breathing institution. It's not sterile. And so if a child is not doing well for some reason, we talk to the foster parent, we see how we can give remedial support, etc. There is no doubt that we have good foster parents. We have some who have 4 children. We have some who have 3. And as I said, when they're finding themselves in difficulties, we assist as best as we can in those circumstances. Admittedly, we would want to give more, but we also don't want the motivation for someone coming to get a child to be purely economic.
Just a follow-up question on adoption, if I may. Could you tell us, you said that it takes something like 6 months to a year for an adoption process to be completed.
Why does it take that long?
Yeah. Why does it take
there
long?
are 3 different forms of adoption in Jamaica. One is family adoptions. For instance, if a family member wants to adopt another family member, those are pretty straightforward and easy. The ones that are difficult is when someone says that they want a baby, a newborn baby, for instance. Those are hard and those take a little longer. Those are the ones that now take between 6 months to a year. And typically, you don't have babies that are readily available. And also, you have to give the mother time to really know if she wants her baby or not. And so sometimes, and we've had an incident in the past where the mother said yes and then didn't want us after a while. The father wanted the baby and said, we're not signing away the parenting rights. And there are instances like that. Those are the ones that take 6 months. So we give some time, especially if a mother has had a baby. And they have specific needs. The ones that are illegal in Jamaica are the prearranged. Because you have to, in order to adopt a child, you have to come through the Child Development Agency. There is no money for adopting a child either in Jamaica. But you can't, for instance, if you get pregnant and say, Mark wants your baby, you can't have any arrangements, prearrangements, because, and typically that's what happened. So after you had the baby, Mark would then come and say, well, we have this baby and we want to adopt the baby. It can't work like that. And that some of those things were happening and there were mediators going in between. So we've arrested the development of that. We've cleared the backlog of the 500 cases that were there. We only have 40 cases that are pending, and those cases are the ones that you refer to, the ones that they have specific needs of the kind of child that they want, what the child should look like, how old the child should be, etc.
Thank you. You can go on.
Thank you. It is reported that directives to place children in children's homes are often not acted upon. Please comment. All children are placed in our homes and places of safety in keeping with the mandate of the courts, taking into account the best needs of our children. The Keating report, what is the status of the implementation? Please comment. And I'm going to ask Mrs. Keating, who is here, to report on that.
Thank you, Minister. In 2003, a commission or a task force was comprising 4 persons was convened to examine and review what's going on in children's homes and places of safety. I was designated the chair of that task force, hence the Keating report. Approximately 93% of the 46 recommendations which were made have been implemented. And here is the breakout. 29 have been fully implemented. 15 are at varying stages of implementation, and 2 are not implemented. Most of the recommendations which have been fully implemented are those which require organizational changes within this Child Development Agency. Those which require changes to strategic approach to management of children are still work in progress. This is understandable since social problems are not solved overnight. They represent cultural changes both at the organizational level and in the community at large. The recommendations which have not been implemented have financial implications. And these really must be factored. First of all, we have to have the relevant needs assessment, and they must be factored into the overall macroeconomic realities. It was originally reported that 3 recommendations have not been implemented, but since the report, 1 recommendation is now being implemented, and that is with the implementation of the case management system, which will install an integrated case management system to support the work being done in the child protection sector.
Thank you. Ms. Sharif?
Could you tell us what are the 3 recommendations that have yet to be implemented? I know you've just indicated that out of 3, 1 is in the process, but what are the other 2?
The strengthening of the foster parenting program, which of course requires financial resources. And the other is a recommendation relating to taxation. We are recommending an increase in taxation in certain areas to help to offset the cost of children care. Those recommendations would be, of course, especially the last one, would be the responsibility of the Ministry of Finance.
Ms. Sharif?
I have a follow-up. Thank you for the information. Could you share with us what are the changes that have taken place as a result of these 46 recommendations? What are the positive changes that have taken place or come into position?
Pardon? Reminding me that 1, I'm her advisor, I went back to work after 15 years in retirement. We have seen changes in the organizational structure of the Child Development Agency, which became an executive agency after the Keating Report. Executive agencies give the Executive Agency Act gives these agencies leverage or the power to take certain decisions and to management decisions, that is, without the approval or prior approval. It gives them more flexibility in their activities. That's one. Two, we have seen changes in with the introduction of new standards, international standards, in keeping with the international child protection initiatives. That's two. Three, the ministry, the portfolio responsibility, the function was removed from the Ministry of Health and put into the Ministry of Youth and Culture. Now, this has now created a greater emphasis on children. With that, you have, as Minister mentioned yesterday, the creation of a Children Affairs Division in the Ministry of Youth and Culture. And also, this has caused greater efficiencies and oversight in the operations of the CDA. There were also some recommendations which required policy decisions, and there was unfortunately a bit of looseness in following through on these decisions. We are now in the process of looking at individual subsets within the recommendations, and have been able to, one, I mentioned the case management program, which has been put in place. The matter of the uncontrollable child is one such result of the transfer, of the transfer of the subject from the Ministry of Health into a Ministry of Youth. So now, greater emphasis on the care and protection of our children.
Please, could you share with us the case management?
I don't have the details at this stage, but it tracks. Would you take it? Okay.
I can add to what she's saying. The case management system is a system that's going to be implemented over the next 3 years. What typically happened was that everything was done manually. All the logs from the child enter the system until they exit from the system. And there was no cohesive strategy in making sure that there were collaborations between health, justice, education, youth and culture, and all the other attendant issues, especially and national security and justice. What the case management system does now is it tracks the child in all areas from they enter the child protection system until they exit. It is a system that has been developed using best practices out of Canada. The technology comes from Canada, and it takes significant financial recurrent expenditure, but it is something that was necessary to do so that we could have better checks and balances. So when persons like yourself ask for statistics and other things, and if we are tracking our children's development, we're in a better position to do it because the information can be pulled up regularly. And that was one of the recommendations also coming out of the Keating report, which has been implemented. And that was implemented last year, coming into this year. So the rollout will be another 2 years. The first phase is now, and then it's an ongoing for the next 3 years before the management, the system is fully implemented.
So you basically have short-term, mid-term, long-term plans on the implementation of the Keating report. And
the other thing that Mrs. Keating, I don't know if you heard when she said it, but we now have what is called Board of Visitors in place to monitor the children's homes and places of safety. And those Board of Visitors are independent oversight body consisting of principals of schools, retired judges, lawyers, guidance counselors who form different parish committees that visit the children's homes and also the juvenile institutions to make sure that we're fulfilling our standards of care.
Could I please have I don't need you to go into all the 46 recommendations, but the very important recommendations, how they have enhanced children's homes. If you could just share with us some of the important recommendations, and how and what happened to the old children's homes? Have they been demolished and new ones built? That kind of information. Thank you.
We'll tag team on this one. All right. One of the first things, I think, as anyone working with children, after a while, if you're not careful, you will have institutional indifference that creeps in to care. And one of the things that we recognized coming out of the Keating report is consistent training of staff and also the upgrading of infrastructure. We have systematically been upgrading our infrastructure in terms of better security. So like at the Granville Place of Safety for Girls, there is perimeter fencing that went in. And at places like Maxfield Park Children's Homes, we have new dormitories and new administration facilities that have gone in for our staff. We have mentorship programs that have been put in. We have extracurricular activities that are being rolled out. In terms of the psychosocial benefits, with UNICEF and with the EU, we recognize that we couldn't take all the girls or boys to one facility, so we put in place what is called a mobile therapeutic clinic, which is like a big bus that is retrofitted with like a counseling room, which has a driver, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and a social worker that visits the children's homes and attend to the children, those who need counseling, those who need medication, etc. As I mentioned, we have the Board of Visitors. We've also put in place, we've completed our audit and we've put in place compliance mechanisms for licensing of the homes. We've already completed, of the 39, I believe, we've completed about 20. 26 have been completed and in compliance for relicensing, and we have the rest to do. So coming out of the Keating report, largely, we've fixed the infrastructural problems. We're ongoing in fixing some of the staffing problems, and where the children are concerned in terms of their emotional development, we're now rolling out those activities. I saw my colleague from Egypt smiling when we spoke about increased taxation, and I think I know why he smiled. So that one might be on the books for a little bit, but depending on how the Ministry of Finance can look at the fiscal space, there might be another way. I'm not quite sure why Mrs. Keating had to use the word increased taxation in her report, and perhaps we could move a motion for her to revise the Keating report to take that word out. So on the whole, it has been a very, very instructive process. And one of the reasons why I went for her out of retirement is because I recognize the importance that all of you placed on the report. And so she was brought in to really make sure that all of the attendant issues to the report were taken care of. And the truth be told, it was really she and I who marshaled a lot of the things over the last 2 years in the sector, because until we got a division with the requisite staff to oversee the monitoring, it was she and I, with the interministerial committee, that really made sure that we fixed a lot of the things that you now see happening through the ministry. I don't know if you want to add anything else. No. Okay.
Well, Ms. Aldozere was before you this time.
Yeah, thank you very much for the positive information. However, can I ask you please to comment on the institutional abuse of children and number of critical incidents in child care institutions following the Keaton report?
Right. You actually asked that question. And we have a zero tolerance policy and a zero tolerance approach for any kind of harm to our children in institutions. If we find that it has happened, it is dealt with urgency, and the staff member is what you call interdicted, which is taken out of the system, and the investigations are carried out on the matter. But on the whole, we don't have widespread situations like that in our children's homes or places of safety. I think typically what happened over the past couple of years is that you might have had an NGO report coming with 1 or 2 situations of a staff member acting hostile to a child, and those measures have been fixed. The other thing I would probably jump really quick to, since you're on the issue of that, is the Armadale report. You asked if family members have been compensated. 2 members have been compensated, and the others are before the court, and the other cases are with the Attorney General's Department. So I just wanted to place that on the record as well. Yes.
Regarding the staff that have abused children, and you have investigated that, and you said that you have taken care of that. Can you tell us, please, on what kind of taking care of the state?
I don't deal with staff issues. I deal with policy. And the policy that I've set is that there has to be a zero tolerance approach to any staff member or any child being harmed in our children's homes. So I leave that to the CEO of the CDA, who is responsible for doing those investigations. And where under our law it is found that they have been derelict in their duties, then of course the staff member is removed from that particular thing. Can I just answer your question on child labor really quickly, because I got the information about the National Plan for Child Labor. It is finalized, and that was done in 2013, and it is now being implemented through the Ministry of Labor and Social Security under its Child Labor Division.
Well, Ms. Sharif was there already on the... is this also on the Keating report? And the follow-up to that? Because, well, just ask it, please.
Yes, I would like to ask about an update on the National Child Diversion Program. Has it been finalized?
Yeah, I think these questions will come to those. But if there is one more brief question on the Keating report, otherwise we need a coffee break.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will make this very quick. Now, your mobile clinics, how often do they go visiting children's homes? Ongoing. Is it weekly, monthly, quarterly? Daily. Okay.
But they don't visit all the children's homes daily. are there so few children? So no, exactly. That's what I'm. That's. I think.
I thought it was implicit. That
Yeah, exactly. But the essence is how often in each home. I mean, how often would they be accessible to each child in the home?
Once a month, I would say. Once a month. Or if the psychiatrist, I spoke to Mrs. Gagegray, if the psychiatrist or the counselor feels that that child needs more intervention, then it's on a needs basis. There's not a program that is a program that says, well, it's once a month, etc. It really is on a needs basis, because you have some children that need more attendance than others.
And your board of visitors that you have appointed, I hope they have had sufficient training. Yes, they are judges, lawyers, and prominent people, but they need to be sensitized in child rights. I hope you've taken those steps. And also, one of the reasons for the fire was, one of the reasons why some of the children died was because they were locked in the premises from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. Do you practice the same system of locking them in, or
no?
No. Okay.
No. At the South Camp Road facility, which was retrofitted, they are not locked in. They have it's more of an open air policy, and it's funny. We took Marta Santos Pais when she visited Jamaica to see it, and she was very impressed with the level of education and services that were being provided, with the training both in terms of sewing, cosmetology, the drama, all the things that were there, and how the girls it's almost like a commune. So you had maybe 10 girls, and in each commune they would have their rooms, which has a grill on it, but the grills are kept open. And they have a general sitting area with a television, like a TV room that they can all converge in, and each one of them looks like that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Then a brief question from Ms. Aldazeri.
Very quickly. What measures have you taken to ensure that children in childcare facilities are not housed with juvenile offenders?
With juvenile offenders.
Addressed by the Keaton report.
Can you repeat the question? Have not been housed with juvenile offenders.
With juvenile offenders.
Okay. We take that very seriously. Typically, what we've had to do is, because we've also removed a lot of the children with uncontrollable behavior out of the juvenile detention centers, we've had to train our staff, especially in some of our children's homes, on how to deal with children who are deemed uncontrollable. That is why we're fast-tracking the therapeutic facility. But no, we do not put children who are offenders in the children's homes with children who are in need of care and protection, or who are neglected, or who are orphans, because that is not a optimal situation, and it's not the best situation for the children either.
Thank you. I think then we've finished the discussion on the Keating report, which was really important and very interesting to also have Ms. Keating here herself to answer some of the questions, and it seems to be an impressive work you've done on it afterwards as well.
Thank you.
I'll just repeat before the coffee break that there was a question that I raised yesterday on discrimination, which was in the first round. So just be sure you come back to that, because I would also like to include sexual orientation, because we have some information that there is discrimination of LGBT children, or based on sexual orientation in Jamaica. So 10 minutes, if we could be back at 10 to 12.